without poil. That's really the best way to say it. Because he's avoiding what he started. He said, he says, no, there is ispashtus. Because in a wounded hand, there's no ispashtus. That's basically the same.
Conscious of a wounded hand, so he calls ispashtus relative to a wounded hand.
Yeah. But it's ispashtus, not and gilui, but not poil. Not poil. So that, in other words, the koyach of the hand, of a healthy hand, is closer to poil than the koyach of unhealth of a wounded hand. That's really what he's saying. It's just an example because he's very thorough here. That's the bottom line. So ultimately, in Atzilus, is going to be that the primis hakelim and the chitzenis hakeli. That's really what he's getting at, right? He's talking about how all the Hagbolah. So he's just defining how far they are from gvul. But it's interface in detail, mamish minute detail, every possibility.
So the kelim are already b'koyach. It's already b'spashus b'gili, but not b'poil. That's the kelim Atzilus.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's going to firace.
Yeah,
but
okay. The hand is dead. It's the same idea.
Wow. So there's a spashtus not begilui?
And gilui.
Then there's a spashtus begilui. And then there's
how the spashtus not begilui?
Wait, the spashtus not begilui.
Spashtus is begilui. It's b'spashtus. The koyach is b'spashtus begilui, but it's not b'poil. That means it only affects when the hand actually.
And really, this should be a period, by the way. V'harei koyach hamagbil is a new thing now. So he covered that. Okay. What's that? Let's map it out. It's a map of the scenarios here. Now starts
how potential becomes actual.
Potential becomes actual, and how Ered becomes Keli. How Ered and Keli.
Yeah. Yes. How the state of potential it is before it becomes actual.
No, but ultimately it's about the fusion of Ered and Keli.
Yeah.
How these two unite. So it's just talking here, In other words, at the end of the day, is Kelim Gvul or Keach HaGvul? That's really the question right now. And he's basically saying in Atzilus it's Keach HaGvul, and Biyah is going to become real Gvul. Remember, Biyah is still Biyah Ruchnin. We're not even talking Biyah Asiyah Gashmis.
Yeah, but once you get there.
How do you trace back to that thing?
How do you retrace back to this?
It's ultimately Atzmo.
Piece of cake.
You know the story of the guy from Chelam comes out and he sees something new. He sees wagons, vehicles moving without horses.
Yeah.
So he comes back, he says, it's unbelievable. In Glacier Stadt, he sees in the big city, he sees a train moving. What's moving it? With no horse pulling it. There's a car behind it, pushing it. And who's pushing the car behind it? Another car. And what about the last car? He says, that I forgot to ask. That's a technicality. So we have the interface working. The question is going to be the last little push. Who's going to make the connection?
Play the feathers by
The fingers. I know, Yossi. I know what you're waiting for. We should prepare 7 billion people, Chinese, and then you're going to come and do you like the match.
Not do that. How do you like the match? That's the question.
Oh, if the fuel is there, yeah.
Nukum. Yossi, maybe it's yesterday's AMM, maybe.
What's today's name?
Yesterday.
What?
I don't know, look it up.
Yeah, but Yossi, that's gedenk was the Gerrit of Gezogt.
Right.
Yeah, some Gerrit Bochum went to Meir Shorim to Essen Bob, because the guys made very good beblach for Shabbos, beans. Yeah. And then they came to the Tish, and Gerrit Tish. And someone gave a burp. So the Gerrit said, beblach est beim Blasen, und begrebt the dog. You want to grab so you eat here, okay?
It's more than a burp. You
Whatever
don't
it
make
is.
you burp.
You'll write the encyclopedia on the burps. We're talking here the encyclopedia and interfaces. I think the Rebbe Rashab is meine Shirayim zijn mechayiv. A Polish should grab Shirayim from the Rebbe Rashab, the same Rebbe Rashab. He says, meine Shirayim zijn mechayiv. Okay, so now there really should be a period here. I realized that's because I was trying to understand how it follows from there. So now he's going back. He's going to make the case. So why can't you say this Koyach HaGvul is actually Gvul? Why didn't you call it Gvul? In the hand, there's a Gvul. It's called the Gvul of limiting. What's Koyach HaMagvul? So he's saying like this: if it was actually Gvul, like the letter on the page, then it should have limited the power and potential of the movement of the hand, meaning all the movements, all the different shapes it can create. The fact that it could limit only limits the actual act, and not the ability to create all different images and different shapes. Is because it's only a power to limit. That's why it does not limit the etzem, the actual faculty of drawing. As I said before, if we looked at a piece of a page, someone written, you could argue if you didn't know better, that's the only thing they could do. Because you see it from the poem, but the fact it's not the way. They can do it many different ways. So you have to say that power, that limiting, is only a power to limit. It's not actual limitation. If there was actually a little man inside your arm that was holding back, then it's a real limitation in your keiches. It's only a power to limit. There has to be examples in physics of this, in science. I'm just thinking. I mean, the ink is a good example as far as just contrast. That you put ink in a pen, that's a real limitation. It's going to run out, and that's it. But what would be an example in a faculty that would be a real limit? It doesn't really exist.
It's quantum. Quantum has every possibility.
And listen, you're making everything quantum. That's disturbing it's just compromising the quantum reality. Everything is quantum.
It is though.
Really?
From a physics point of view, yes.
Yeah, but even the quantum mechanics does not regulate macroscopic world.
It does actually. It really does. It's very hard to make experiments with it. It's the same thing.
Theories.
Exactly.
Now, I believe that and accept that, but at this point in the game, they haven't yet found a way to bridge the two. That's what we said. Because if you could bridge the two, then every day you can come in with a different color.
Well, how they with the
It's a marble
experiments with the waves and the
marble
particles,
experiment.
they
The
did
marbles.
experiments with
The
the marbles,
marbles,
they do experiments.
No, there are, but it's only microscopic levels. They can't. It does not. It's another discussion. Look, the point is, but just, I just want to tell you, there's this. There was this physicist who passed away young. He was in Baltimore. Chabad guy. What was his name? He was a physicist. He wrote with the Rebbe. The Rebbe wrote with him in the 70s. He passed away. In the 80s. What was his name? Anyway, he wrote to the Rebbe about indeterminism and Heisenberg's uncertainty.
Not Berg, you're not talking about that.
No, Berg is way to go.
90s.
He is Berg.
Yeah.
What's his first name?
Berg.
Naftali Berg.
I didn't think about Borg.
Baltimore, right?
Yeah, well, he was the Pentagon head of the
Yeah, so he wrote to
Defense
him.
Department.
Yeah. He passed away in the 90s.
Yes.
I thought it was much earlier.
No.
He was a young man.
I met him.
A young man, right?
Yes.
Brilliant guy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
He was head of
So
he was head of defense.
So the Rebbe wrote to him something which I wrote about in terms. I did this research on it. The Rebbe said you cannot use uncertainty to explain miracles. Why did he say that? Because then basically then you take away the power of the miracle. So it's not so black and white how we picture it. Because if it's uncertainty, then it's not a miracle. And everything, of course, uncertainty is all the time. The fact that Kriyas Yamsuf, let's say, happened because you got into that state of probability. So Yam and Yabosha, there's no rules. The Rebbe did not. The Rebbe negated that you could explain miracles with that for some reason. I have to look into it again. It's just something to look into.
Point?
Very interesting point.
You hear that one?
Yeah.
You're not
my-
building a nest.
That's an amazing point.
Yeah. No, my point is, but it's not negating and limiting quantum reality. It's just saying God did create a world that there are rules.
Right.
And Kosher could create Yamsuf, even from God's point of view.
Even quantum.
Obviously, God can reach into uncertainty, but he wanted it, when you say miracle, you want it on the level within in the rules of Newtonian physics. That's where it should be. Anyway, it's something to look into. The bottom line is, the goal is to bridge the two. We're not talking about us, we should all become quantum. There's nothing more. Look, Beis Hamikdash is a Beis Hamikdash. It's not going to be a kohen is going to be a kohen, not a Levi, even on the quantum reality. You want his chalkos, but his chalkos should be permeated with Lamaylam his chalkos.
Now I'm going to answer to you. You say you're Teres Simon. Simon, you tell him you're Teres, then we suffer a whole week.
But I still don't understand this last part because when the
Here
Rebbe
comes.
saying
But I want to say something.
I'm suffering 24/7 with this.
You've been something for an hour a day.
A whole week we have to go, oh, this is nice.
Wie jenes gesagt, ich gewähnt 50 Jahre, jetzt kann der Mizbeach wenden. You know? It's not a good joke.
Lucas, what was that?
No.
No, it's Mizbeach made it moist and certain things. A guy came with one of these results, guy wanted to came to Rav. So Rav said, the Mizbeach is made it moist when you get. He says, ich gewähnt 50 Jahre, jetzt kann der Mizbeach wenden.
What was it?
We're talking about a
Yeah, Gag, what was that? Was it quite
First of all,
He said, I cried for 50 years, now let them as best cry.
But I just want to qualify one thing. He's definitely not talking quantum here. This Koyach Hayah, Koyach Hagbola is not quantum, is a different level, and that's not here. And we need to discuss this. But quantum is a precious. It's like Kodesh Kodashim. You can't just make everything quantum. It's not. It's not good for the quantum. It's not good for reality.
Did you ever write anything on quantum?
I've written plenty of it.
Simon,
Yeah.
Simon, this guy came to the Rav, he said, Rebbe, ich will give him my wife a get. So the Rav looked at me and says, wer will nicht?
Okay, now we're getting. I told you, I didn't like the getting jokes. We won't say who said it. Okay.
Why, even when Chapra becomes being that it's quantum, I mean, why would you say that? It's a framework for us to look at. I mean, you want to
One second. Did God create a world with parameters or not? Forget about what
Maybe
you
the
know about
parameters are quantum parameters.
So you could say the parameters. No, what you're saying is that there's no parameters. There are parameters.
There are.
As a matter of fact, Kirach's argument was one that there's no parameters. He wanted quantum without parameters, and that was not a kavan. The kavan is there's gvul. There is gvul in it.
Why can't you say those are the parameters? The quantum has a million possibilities, not a...
No, that's not. But that's not what it says, because it says that it says like this: where quantum. Listen, I'm not talking now. I'm talking pure from Chassidus point of view right now. Okay, let me just say the following: it's not really relevant at all to this discussion because he's not talking on that level. Quantum fits in this context where it says, where we learned a few chapters back, that from Atzma's point of view, there could have been Esser spheres bleakheads. There could have been unlimited unlimited spheres, and in different ways than they are now, and in infinite possibilities. There did not have to be a laws of logic. There did not have to be any parameters or structures as we know it. That's where quantum fits very well. However, that same Atzmos, and that's where science has not discovered yet, wanted 10 spheres, and they're 10, they're not 15, they're not 11, they're not, it says 10, not 9, not 11. So the question is, how does the quantum
Fit into that.
potential of Atzmos fit into the fact that he now wants it? And they are parameters, because if there's no parameters, there's no halacha. You could say that all the halachas fall off if you go to quantum. It's dangerous. That's what I'm saying to you. It's not so simple. You can't just go into quantum, because then in that case, then Shabbos, 7 days a week you can find Shabbos if you go into the potential state. So what happens on Friday night? That's not Thursday night. So the challenge is, how do you bring these two realities together? That I agree, we need to do that. But just to make everything into quantum,
What is quantum? Sorry.
quantum is a state, as I said. Imagine all possibilities. It's a probable state where everything is possible.
So it's on a level where everything is Yechelis.
Yeah. In Chelis in our language, if you want.
Yes.
So anyway, this is a more discussion. I'd rather reserve to discuss, but it's not.
I only put it in physics.
What? Okay. So what I'm saying, what are you going to do with the we're talking about Torah-dika parameters. I'm not talking about science. I don't care about if science.
I think it's totally. I mean, because you know what?
Okay, so why can't you put on film tomorrow for 2 days?
Because
Let me ask you. Why can't you put on film for 2 days? Go into the quantum state and put on
You're
film.
looking at the probabilities, and by you looking at the probabilities,
Plus one
it
reality.
still goes into one reality. Still goes into.
But is
one
there a
reality.
bridge between
And
these
we don't
two?
pick the reality.
But is there a bridge? But is there a bridge? No, I understand what you're saying. But once it goes into one reality,
Yeah, but still
can you
from
connect to the
reality,
quantum?
Yeah.
To the other reality? No.
Because that's the highest aspect of God.
No, but you see, but doctor, listen a second.
Well,
Listen,
this is
no,
one
you didn't
box.
hear what I asked you. We all agree there's a quantum reality. Now the quantum reality becomes one reality. I agree. Now it's a particle. Fine. The question that science does not address is, and this is maybe that's what we're talking about. Can that particle, as it's a defined particle now, connect back to the quantum reality, where there's no definition? You'll make everyone crazy for the week about that. Let's move on.
I just had this.
You understand what I just said? That's I understand what you're
I
saying.
understand.
So you're told, you were lying.
In this other
What he's saying,
quantum-
what you're saying is like there's a constant journey from quantum to defined. I got that. The question is the defined. See, only Chassidus wants the defined to be connected to the quantum because of Atzmus. Science doesn't really care, in a way.
Actually, it was brought up, the same question was brought up, and I'm trying to think about it.
Okay, look, listen, this is the middle of the discussion, we'll discuss more of it. I just want to finish the chapter at least.
But I don't understand this last point. Levad, ain't a magbil be'etzem hakoach. But somebody who's an expert in anatomy and a master of anatomy, or
Right.
somebody who's an artificial intelligence developing a robotic arm or hand would be able to look at the etzem of the koach of a hand, the ultimate ability of the hand to move, and that is limited even in etzem. Even in etzem. How come the Rabbi says, Inke einu magbil be'etzem hakoach? There is a number of, if you had a supercomputer, you could, an engineer, if somebody was combined engineering and anatomy, could develop a model in a computer that would basically set the entire field of what a hand could do.
No, but you can always.
Of course it could. It's
No,
limited.
you can always add another squiggle.
A hand can't break. I can't
You
connect
can
this.
always
A
add
hand
another
touch your
squiggle, just
wrist.
like you can't do the
and a
highest
hand
number.
touch your wrist. No.
You can always add another number.
You can limit. You have
No.
ability, ultimate ability. Well,
Yes, it's a good question, but let me answer it. One second. You're not the first that has this question, by the way. It's a question, it's a good question. Let me explain, it's a very good question. I understand what he's saying. He's basically saying that, yeah, from an external point of view, you write a letter on a page, it's a defined letter, and before you wrote it, you could write many letters. But if you have a number cruncher or something in this, and you put all the potential possibilities, it's going to be a certain parameter at the end of the day.
Not Kechatzir, because even the best computer in the world will never be able to
It's like I
paint.
give you the highest number you give, and I can say close. Just like every little possibility.
There's a certain infinity in the hand.
That's one point.
There is a certain infinity.
But I want to categorize. I think what you're saying is, you're correct when you're saying a hand can only go certain directions, for example. That's correct. But when you're talking about how many letters will this hand actually produce?
Or paintings.
So as he said, the potential is unlimited. Obviously limited to your lifespan.
Right.
The person's hand, and limited as long as he can use his hand. But there is a state of being that you're talking about. That a machine could just say, yeah, I could predict every possible image you're going to make.
Right.
But it's still a possible image. It's still not.
It's not even limited to your lifespan.
Even that computer, what it's doing is simply crunching a lot of possibilities.
Because
It's still a possibility. That's really what he's trying to say.
Mona Lisa,
He doesn't say Glik
way
It
beyond
says ain't no rule, Batson, magbil Batson.
What do you mean? What do you mean you have to fall on his life?
I know Glik Vul.
Let's be honest,
We did say-
What do you mean you have to
Right.
What?
We're talking obviously relative.
What do you mean Mona Lisa's beyond his time?
It's not Glik Vul of Elokus, obviously. That's number one. No, but I want to say, but it's not. We're not talking about Glik Vul as.
Compared to our.
He brought out infinity.
Yeah, but let's put it this way. Do you understand the difference between the power to create many different letters and the actual creating of one letter?
Yes.
Beyond his lifespan?
That's all relevant, really. It's not, we're not here to make a scientific case for Glik Vul. That's not the point. He's just trying to say it's not the Gvul of the Gvul on paper. That's all that's really relevant here.
Yeah, but-
However you understand it. The bottom line is
Da Vinci
much
said and the Mona
stronger
Lisa's alive.
But do you have the ability, but one second, would you have the ability?
Or Michelangelo.
I was waiting for Michelangelo one.
I like the better one.
This is the
Nietzsche
jackal.
said God is dead. God said Nietzsche's dead. Anyway, let's finish what he says,
Okay.
and we can analyze it. Okay. So there's something inside. There's a break inside the gas of the hand. The gas is keich hispashtus. The break is keich agbola. Correct. So if you only had gas, you just write, and it would be complete gibberish. But the hand, because of intelligence, obviously, like you said, kefir tzene, the hand can impose a brake, like a car brake, and stop the flow. Yeah. That, yeah, just stop the flow and start, or make a letter aleph, not beis, or a big letter, a small letter. So, in the pu'ula there's Hagbola, but the koyach, the break itself, is part of the power of extension. It's limiting an extension, so that pu'ula. But it doesn't limit the potential, because if it was actually like ink in a pen,
Right.
if it was actually a real defined force, it would limit, and that would be it. It would be limited. And the fact is, like he says, "L'chen gam Hagbola pel einu b'chinas gvul mamish." That's why it's not gvul mamish. That's what he's saying. He didn't say bli gvul. It's not gvul mamish. It's not tangible, defined gvul. That's what he means. Shari yochel lichtiv harbe eish is bli gvul, because he can write many letters without limit. Again, bli gvul is relative here.
Right.
Adam. The gam yochel is pashas bli Hagbola, and can also extend in unlimited ways. So it's not just how many, also in this expansion. Okay. So that's what he's established now. That he established that it's not gvul mamish. Basically, he's established that there's gvul mamish and it's not gvul mamish. And that itself, if you remember, he said the difference between the spashtus that before expand it's still closer to gvul mamish, and then there's, let's say, a wounded hand or a handicap or a defective, that even that's not there at that point. Now all this is a mashal. So it's a mashal, an example for what the K'moy came b'kelim d'atzilas, same thing as the kelim of atzilas. Husha Pa'ula, the kelim of Atzil, the containers of Atzilas, Husha Pa'ula b'biyah, that affect the function. Pa'ula, the impact. How would you say Pa'ula? The action.
Yeah.
The action in biyah, the hainu k'moshe bo chutz l'Atzilas.
Yeah.
That means biyah meaning the way it's outside of Atzilas. Think of it like now the paper outside of the hand. The hand is Atzilus, with all its powers. Keich HaGvul, Keich is pashtus, everything. Esesvidus and everything like that. The hand outside. Now the hand of Atzilus is going outside of Atzilus to Biyah. Chutz l'Atzilus. Tiyeh b'chinas Hagbola. Av b'Atzilus ain't b'chinas Blikvul. But not Atzilus, it's still on a level of Blikvul. Again, relative we're talking. Because it's like the hand. Before it's ready to create a letter. So once you said Asara Mamoris Nivra Elam, he Eir. That's already in Biyah. You have Eir. You have Rekia. But the words, but the mouth that the Abish is saying, let's say, you hear a key, he could have said 1,000 other different things. He didn't bepoil. So in his mouth, you say, is he defined by the Asara Mamoris? That God could only say 10 utterances? No, he could have said millions of utterances.
What is the essence of Atzilus then?
Keich HaGvul. That's what he's saying right now, for all practical purposes. Let's read. He's going to say, Keich HaGvul, Keich HaMagbe, like in the hand. It's still a hand. It's not a leg, and it's still a hand that draws letters.
Right.
It's not a hand that creates miracles. U'kamaymer midasan eser she'ein lehem sof. This is from I think from the Sefer Yetzirah. U'kamaymer, like it says, that their number is 10. Midasan is their measure, actually, right? Midasan is their measure. Their measure is 10. She'ein lehem sof, that have no end. What does that mean? How could 10 not have an end? 10 does have an end. He's explaining a paradox. It says 10 and has no end. The koy ala kelim, that's talking about the kelim. Some places it talks about the eris, but it's talking about the
Still
kelim.
relative.
The ze'inyin midasan esen, that's what the meaning is midasan. Their measure is 10. The hainu kamoisha eris boy m'chinas medida. The word is medida. Because the eir, relative to the kelim right now, it doesn't have a medida. Medida means measurable. So the fact that it says midason eser, he's saying is proof that it's talking about the containers. They come in a form of measurement. Shezol b'chinas hakelim. That's the level of kelim. But you're saying that they're ein lem sof. The batzil is guf ein b'chinas ein sof. What does it mean? It means midason eser. They have the measure of 10 that it creates letters, and let's say the parameters of letters are 10 from chachma through malchus. But in the hand, in Atzilus, it's still in the level of Ein Seif. It's a Keich HaMagbil, it's Keich HaGvul, and effectively can do all kinds of different types of letters. When does it become actual 10? That you could say 10 actual, defined, tangible? When it's on paper, when it's in Biyah. So for practical purposes right now, Atzilus is the way the hand is shaping the 10 letters, or the 10 spheres. It's really what it is. So it has an element that's not Gvul Mamash. Remember, compared to the Eir, the whole point of this chapter is that Keli is Magbul the Eir. So in Atzilas Gufa, it's still not the Eir HaNefesh, it's the Keach in the hand that's Magbul, that's going to be in Biyag Vul Mamish. That's why it's so subtle, so many levels here. It's still, I just said.
Talking Kalim, basically.
It's still Kalim, it's still not, it's still, and even the Kalim are this way. But he's going to say now, okay, the Yesh Leimer, listen to the Chiddush here. Remember we talked about the interface? Suddenly the Chetzenis HaKalim are also now Nishtazei Poshet.
He keeps on saying that the whole time. That's what drives us crazy.
The Yesh Leimer,
At the end of the day, it's in Chetzenis HaKalim.
well, that's the point.
I know.
But now,
But we're not getting there yet.
no, but you see, Doctor, listen.
And whenever we go down, he goes back to Chochmas Timor.
Anchored. He's anchored.
No, but when you go to Chochmas Timor, do it also go down? That's the key.
I don't know which way.
Because you're only no, because no, there's no question he's taking it all back. He wants to lift the Tzimtzum. We all want that. I'll tell you. For years I did that, and now I'm on my way back down. Because you got to come back down, of course. Huh?
We got a head start.
Okay, so Yesh Leimer the Kamei came again b'chinas Chetzenis HaKalim. Yesh Leimer even Chetzenis HaKalim also. So Yesh Leimer. Because you could argue that all this is Keich HaGvul, is the Primis HaKalim, and the Chetzenis HaKalim is already beginning of Gvul. So he's saying, no, the Chetzenis HaKalim is also this level. Shahari Kolos HaKalim Datzilis, Hein Elokus Mamish. Because the general Kalim, the entire concept of Kalim containers in Atzilus is Elokus Mamish, is Mamish divine. And therefore also the external, all of them, the entire container is a Keach HaGvul Levad, because it's Elokus. Remember, interface, and all this is lower than Chochmas Timah. Remember, the ultimate goal is not just a mathematical equation of how you make the interface. It's bringing it down into our reality. And our reality is plenty of limitations. And if you need to be reminded, just look up Kingston Avenue. Or look at ourselves, right? I mean looking at others. I mean look at the reality. Reality. This is emes, the way it's supposed to be. And then there's what we have. It's not supposed to depress us. So imagine the Rabbeim. Now think, they lived in this level all the time. They suddenly have to deal with us. Tell me, explain to me that type of what's the word for it? Discipline, patience. Huh?
They had Schwitz.
Schwitz? It's more than Schwitz.
Oh, they had to schwitz, you think.
I understand what Schwitz means. I understand. I think it's more than.
He had to relate to us.
You understand why the Rebbe didn't want to become Rebbe? He wanted this. What does he have to deal with? We're talking about not only Esses Fidus and Biyah, we're talking about outside of Tehu, with his, with the 4 levels of dysfunctionality is still on the map. What about, if he's off that map too?
Eventually, everybody gets married.
What was that? I lost you.
What is this?
You mean that-
Talmud and
So let's just finish the period. Okay, name like Boulevard. Okay. L'chein ma'esses fidus atzilus efshali is adayin esavas elemes. So that's why from Esses Fidus alone of Atzilus you cannot have creation of the worlds, the formation of the worlds, the existence of the worlds. Kima yedei aparsa shebein Atzilus to Biyah. In case you were wondering, there's another thing he has to add now. Parsa. There's a parsa. Parsa is a curtain.
No, but that's the Bekir that we learned before.
But
Yeah.
It's a divider. There's a pasach. There's parsayis, mesachim, kinds of parsa. The actual translation of parsa would be a divider, right? Like a parechis is a curtain. Parechis is a curtain. Parsa is in Aramaic. Is parsa parechis in Aramaic? No. Parechis is a curtain.
Yeah.
Pargud. Pargud is a curtain as well, but a thicker curtain. And a parsa is a divider. Yeah, it could be a space, but it doesn't matter. It's
not a space. It's a divider because in order to break through the parsa, there has to be a bekir. So in other words, you're breaking through something. It's not just space. It's an actual division.
I have to look at what you can find a good translation for parsa.
The word distance for parsa is with an aleph, with an ayin, parsa.
Parsa is with an aleph.
No, when you say in Gemara, the parsa has a distance.
It's a hay.
Is that a hay?
Yeah, parsa.
Yeah.
Comma
parsas, yeah. Okay.
Olive and a hay.
Aleph and A exchangeable depending on in Aramaic you
That's
use an
why I
aleph.
thought it was spaced.
So ben atzilus l'biyah, parsa ben atzilus l'biyah. Avalula parsa, but without the parsa, without this divider, ef shalis yisavas gam b'chinas ha'chetzenis hakel.
Maybe that's the invitation.
Even chetzenis hakel, he couldn't have the yisavas. Va'afilim ha'madreges ha'tachtenim shavat ha'tachtenim.
Everything will be looked at.
And even from the lowest levels of atzilus, you couldn't have yisavas. Creation.
Could be. Everything
Well,
is.
commercial customer.
One second, what is this parsa here?
Yeah.
Where is he going to describe it? We've been talking about Kalim. It's not a Kalim. It's a different. It's what the Kalim have to pass.
Right around the corner. Yeah.
So that what does Rabbi has he explained it already? And I
Yeah, but the main passage that before also, yeah.
Explains it later. But there's okay.
Next 3 inches.
The parsa. The parsa is the relevance of the parsa is right now only relevant for one purpose here. It's not look.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Not all chassidus could fit into the one
Right,
paragraph here. Parsa is just simply relevant to explain the distance of Atzilus. He's going now the other side of it. Till now he's bringing it down into Kelim. Primis Kelim is a container. That container connects to the air. Now he's just qualifying it all by explaining that in Atzilus it's all still in the Keach HaGvul. And Atzilus on its own would not be able to create without the parsa. The point is like this. You have two things here. The hand has the power to create letters.
Right.
But I would say the equivalent, I don't know if there's a parsa in the Moshel, but I'll just give an example. In Atzilus is an additional element. Atzilus, the 10 spheres of Atzilus, think of it as the hand of the artist that can potentially create 10 different spheres. Okay, but it needs an additional jump for it to go into actual gvul. I guess that's the jump from when the hand goes to a paper and actually puts it on paper. That's the parsa that's necessary. He's not really going into it. Just
like
the point.
the mashal and the nimshal changed here. Before, when we were talking about the hand, he was referring to it as the koach of bli gvul.
Keich HaGvul.
A gvul?
Yeah.
We just said it has the aspect of
But it's called Keich HaGvul. It can express itself in the
We said
potential.
kind of bli gvul ba'kadam.
He keeps saying Keich HaGvul. Keich HaGvul is what he keeps calling it.
About the matzat koach
Anyway,
what my point here was that with the hand, I thought it was talking about the etzem in the yad has this infinite ability. It's only once you put it on paper does it limit it.
More of an expression.
But when he goes to the tzilus, the kelim of tzilus, he uses the term koach gvul.
He uses Keich HaGvul the whole time.
But how about with this line here? But Keton is a
Read it later. It
Okay.
says Keich HaGvul. Trust me. It says Keich HaGvul. It says Keich HaMagvul, Keich HaGvul. He keeps saying it's Keich HaGvul. It's not Gvul Mamish. So the parsa adds the element of the jump here. Okay. U'kamesha kosabel kutatera da ma yofe pamayich benalayim. Benolim in the Shir Hashirim, like it says, Lukutatera ma yofe pamayich benolim. The gamma b'chinas hamalchus, which is the lowest level of Atzilus, haya elam ispasha b'li gvul v'ketz. That even from Malchus of Atzilus, the world would have extended without any limit and end.
That happened, that's why Shindal.
Ushiyeh Yisavas b'chinas gvul mahalach tovkov shana. In order for the Yisavas to be defined and limited, mahalach, the Gemara says, between one Ruki and the next, between one heaven and the next, is the mahalach is a travel of 500 star years, 500 years. Huayde malach sandal. That's through the malach sandal.
Star years, you're calling it?
I just give an example.
I mean, light years?
Light years.
Well, it doesn't say that.
No. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's a traveling of 500 years.
Yeah.
It would take 500 years to travel, meaning that there's a definition.
Yeah.
That happens with the malach sandal. That's nala. The nala.
malach sandal.
Malach sandal. So malach is called sandal. Sandal is a
The sandal?
sandal. Shu bechinas now. The level of the shoe. Hachefa al haregel bechinas malchus. Is the leg that is the shoe that covers.
It's not a sandal because the sandal has holes. Here it says it doesn't have holes.
Okay. Shu bechinas now. There's a shoe. Hachefa that covers. Hachefa sometimes means that like surrounds.
Right.
Like a chub. Hachefa al hanal al haregel bechinas malchus.
Right.
So Malchus itself cannot do it without the Nal. It needs the Shu. What's the Shu? And Ruchni is the Parsha, basically.
Yeah, because
That allows that from Atzilus on its own. So bottom line is like this. Atzilus is, as I said, it's Midas and Eser She'en Lem Sof. It's a hand in this, but think of it as the God's hand as God's artist. God is the artist. His hand has now defined that he's going to create 10 spheres, shape 10 spheres, 10 shapes. But when it's still in the level of the hand, it still has its Keich HaGvul, meaning it has a potential to go many different ways, potential, infinite, unlimited ways. Here it's not even Bli Gvul Adam anymore. Now we're talking about Bli Gvul of Elikus. And then, in order to actually turn it into 10, besides the will, comes the parsha that limits that power inside the hand, so to speak, of Atzilus. And now you're able to actually have 10 defined spheres that are not Bli Gvul. If you took away the parsha, you would not, in other words, in this case, Malchus, that the Nal, that even the lowest levels of Atzilus would extend forever and ever.
What's the magic of the parsha that it has?
Concealment. It's concealment of the power, of the intensity. In other words, even the way the Eibishter wants Gvul, still he wants it, it's still part of the Pcheichem Espashet of Elikus, still part of his extension. It's still going too fast, so to speak. It still needs another break. It needs another...
The marshal of the Chovis, the key of the Chovis, that's the parsha.
Yeah.
Remember the Chovis?
Yeah.
So what's his relationship of the Malach Sandal? That's the
Parsha. V'hu b'chinas menal shel eir hamaylim legamri. And that's the meaning of menal shel eir. It's a shoe of a leather. Eir is flesh, but leather.
Hide.
Eir here is leather?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hide. Shel eir.
Shoes are made of leather.
Yeah.
Sandal. It's wrapped around.
Eir is leather in Hebrew is eir.
Yeah.
But eir is also like custom eir is also
Skin.
sometimes skin and flesh. Okay, flesh, it's hide.
Skin of
Okay,
the
so this is the shoe of leather. Hamaylim legamri, completely conceals. Like you see, it completely conceals. It protects the foot, but it also allows the flow, limits the flow, so it should actually become the fine 10 spheres instead of it potentially going forever. As he will explain later, in the whole concept of mesachim, which is curtains and parsais and dividers. Yeah, there's a whole, sugya or something.
Don't get lost, don't get too excited, become welcome.
And nevertheless, nevertheless, the outer containers are still separate and detached from the energy. Why? Because at the end of the day, they're still on the functional level. They're dealing with the function, as he said, the function that's going to ultimately
Create something.
Even though it's believable.
Whereas the Primus HaKelim, the Primus HaKelim, as he said, like Machshava, is united with the energy and is focused more on describing the power of the energy.
One facing up, one facing back.
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly right. And I would go even further, using the hand example, if we're able to dissect it, it would look like this. The hand has the potential to write all kinds of letters. So there's an energy in the hand that's Kayachais Pashtus, which means the expression of that. That's like Primus HaKelim. The inner container is essentially describing that this hand has power. The outer container is essentially saying this hand also has limit. But it's still, that limit is still all part of the potential. But so therefore, Chetzenes HaKelim are still univdal because it's already preparing the ground for the next stage where it's actually going to happen. Now, of course, you need the parsa to make it happen. So you really have different, in the interface, you have different stages, each dealing with another thing. The inner container is preparing to bring the air, the energy into the situation. The outer container is preparing the air to go into the next level. And that's what you're dealing with, right? And that's how you have it working. So what you really want in the interface is that the Chetzenes Keli, that that the Pa'ula in Biyah should connect with the outer container, which connects with the inner container, which connects with the energy, which connects us all the way to the artist. That's what you'd like to have, a seamless flow. So let's read the Kitzur and we'll stop here. The outer container, inner container and outer container is like machshava, dibur, thought and speech. Gam esis ha-machshava magbilin. So he begins the other way around. That even the letters in thought also define and limit the containers. In other words, but kol mokim harizeh lov vush hamiyuchad. Nevertheless, it's a united and attached garment. Yuraka Gil Atzme, because it's only revealed to himself. Vagam the Klos Hagbola became Latzilus Yurak Lahag B'chutz Latzilus, and even though the general finite nature and definition of the containers is only to limit the flow outside, like we just said with a hand, is the flow on the paper, not, like the power to limit, that's in the power of the movement of the hand. No. The end of the Mekol Mokim is a Mekol Mokim as a B'chinas Nivdal Menayer. So he goes like it's a long thing. V'agam, it says like this. V'agam, even though the Klos Hagbol, even though the general limit is only to limit outside of Atzilus, like the limitation of the Keich, that even when it's mispashet, Ein Magbal Kim Chutzolei, even when it's already in a state where it's about to write, it's only limiting it outside of itself. But does not limit it within itself. Surely that's also with the outer containers. Here he says vade before he says yeshlemer. Yeah, now it's already vade. That's why you need a parsa. So this long hagam, where he starts saying here, hagam the klosin agbol the kalim that tzilis is a long thing, ends in the last line. That even though these kalim are really not gvul mamish, they're only limiting the flow, nevertheless, and even the outer containers, nevertheless, the outer containers as nivdal are still separate from the air in this context. And to understand this begins by Inyan Hu, the whole thing of Tzelem and Mus, Achkike, and then he goes back to Dasai and Das Tachten, right? And then he goes into the four.
Those four.
Where you guys
Four
are.
children.
Before.
From the face, book comes.
What's the difference between?
It says four, maybe.
Yeah, let's stop here. We're stopping at page Tofku 584, end of, we did chapter 288.
We learned.